Higher Level Biology for the IB Diploma Program, Pearson book, 3rd edition. Theme C, Interaction and Interdependence. Chapter 3, Organisms. So this is C.3.1, Integration of Body Systems. 2 guiding questions. What are the roles of nerves and hormones in integration of body systems? What are the roles of feedback mechanisms in regulation of body systems? Okay, so we've got integration, how the different systems of the body work together, and regulation, okay, how they work properly so that they don't get all out of whack and do weird things, so they stay in balance. Multicellular organisms have specialized cells that form tissues. Specialized cells means cells with specific responsibilities, with specific shape, form, duties, and these form tissues. Tissues are responsible for specific functions within an organism and as a consequence make up organs. Okay, so we're not talking about tissues that you blow your nose with, like paper tissues. This is a different meaning of the word tissue. Okay, so if you have a small sample of a liver, someone's liver, you have a tissue sample. You have liver tissue in your hand. You don't have the whole liver there. You have liver tissue. So it's like some of it. Okay? So all together, it makes up an organ. In order for the tissues within organs to work in concert with each other, so there can be different kinds of tissues within an organ. So a liver can have different types of tissues because an organ is like a liver is comprised of different components that work all together as an organ. So work in concert means to work together. There must be communication between the tissues. That makes sense. One part of the liver needs to be able to communicate with another part of the liver for it to all work as a liver. Without a means of communication, the emergent property represented by an organism would not be possible. Okay, an emergent property, right? Remember what that is? So when you have all these systems, when they work together, it creates something new. You create person. Okay, you're not just your liver or just your heart. You need to have communication between all of these systems, and they need to work in concert for you to exist as a person. A human being or a magnolia tree, basically animals and plants and all living creatures, can only exist because its cells, tissues, and organs have evolved ways of communicating with each other. If you're a one-cellular organism, you don't need to communicate between your different cells, but multicellular organisms so you've got like the cell level, then you've got a bunch of cells, similar cells together that make up a tissue, and then you've got several different types of tissues that together work to make an organ. Okay, and then you have a bunch of organs that are all put together and make a being, you or a magnolia tree. 2 systems have evolved within animals specifically, so now we're talking about animals, to enable communication between and thus integration of body systems. So communication from one body system to the other. So from the digestive system to the nervous system, for example. So there's got to be communication between these different body systems, and which then creates integration. So makes them all work together. So there are 2 systems in animals. The first one is the nervous system, which we just looked at in the previous chapter, right? In C.3.1 and 2.2. A nervous system designed to receive sensory information, so information from your senses, touch and sight and smell, all of those, designed to receive sensory information through structures called receptors and send motor responses to muscles, resulting in movement. Right? So your nervous system takes in information about the world around you, and it sends information to your muscles and other parts of your body to do things. An endocrine, so the second one, so that's the nervous system. The second system is the endocrine system. An endocrine system consisting of glands that respond to chemical signals in the body with the production and release of a variety of hormones. So they make hormones and they send hormones out. These are different glands. Glands are little small organs around the body. For example, the adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys. You've got other glands as well. Lots of different kinds of glands. And they produce and release hormones. Hormones affect the activity of specific cells known as the target tissue of a particular hormone. So a hormone has target tissue, right? Some cells of a specific kind, specialized cells, somewhere in the body that hormone can connect to, because there's receptors there that match the hormone, which is a ligand, right? The hormones are ligands. Chemical signaling molecules. Plants also use hormones for chemical communication, which resulting in a variety of responses. But plants don't have a nervous system. Humans and many other organisms have evolved feedback mechanisms that inform the body of the need for action by one or more body tissues. Usually these feedback mechanisms, so processes that send information back or cause reactions to happen. This chapter looks at that. It looks at feedback mechanisms. What is that exactly? Okay, these feedback mechanisms work to keep a factor within a normal homeostatic range. If you don't remember homeostatic, good idea to look it up. Examples of factors kept within a normal range are body temperature and levels of glucose in the bloodstream. Okay, so our bodies need to maintain a certain temperature or a certain temperature range. Whereas if the body becomes too hot over that range or too cold, bad things start to happen. If a factor rises above a particular level or set point, the body will initiate one set of actions to bring levels down. If a factor goes below the set point, like if your body temperature begins to drop too much, another set of actions will be initiated to bring that factor back to the set point. So if your body temperature starts to fall, your body responds in a way to get it back up. This is called negative feedback control. Okay? So when something's happening to take you out of the homeostatic range, it sets off a reaction to move you back towards it. And that is a negative feedback control. Okay. C.3.1.1. So what we just read was the introduction to the chapter. Now we're going to read C.3.1.1, which is coordinating systems. The understanding that this subsection covers is system integration. So you've got lots of systems in your body that are integrated, need to work together. This is a necessary process in living systems. Coordination means working together, right? Coordination is needed for component parts, different parts of the system, component parts of a system to collectively perform an overall function. Okay? This is a necessary process in living systems. Coordination is needed for component parts of a system to collectively perform an overall function. That is system integration. Living organisms are complex. That complexity is the result of millions of years of evolutionary adaptations that represent only the relatively few mutations that gave an organism a greater chance to survive and reproduce. All life started as single-celled organisms and has expanded into the rich variety of single-cell and multicellular life that exists today. Okay, so there's mutations happening all the time. New things are popping up all the time. But if that mutation increases the survival rate of an organism, then the chance that that mutation gets passed on obviously increases. And there you go, millions of years later, and you have all of this variety, of all this difference. In order for complex organisms to evolve to survive in their environments, it was necessary for cells to become specialized for certain functions. So function is a job in this sense. Okay, cells have jobs. Groups of specialized cells become specialized tissues. And groups of specialized tissues become organs. Became organs. Some organs have evolved to work collectively to accomplish certain functions and have become body systems. So we have tissues, organs, body systems, which is a level of complexity. Body systems are specialized for functions such as obtaining nutrients, obtaining means getting, discarding waste, getting rid of waste products in the body, and reproduction, right? Making babies. All of the body systems working in unison, so working together at the same time, represent the entire organism. Coordination is needed for the component parts of organisms to collectively perform complex functions. We have a little picture of a puffin here. And it says the Atlantic puffin and many other animals use the same specialized systems as humans. All of its cells, tissues, organs, and body systems work collectively as a puffin. Some organisms have evolved into organized collections of billions of cells. The cells in one part of the organism often need to communicate with other cells where cell-to-cell communication is impossible. Okay, so sometimes you've got cells that need to communicate with each other, but we can't do cell-to-cell communication for some reason, several different reasons. It can be because they're too far away from each other. It's a big one. Two systems of communication have evolved to enable communication within organisms and facilitate efficient processes, okay, to help make things be more efficient. Okay, so we've got two communication systems in the body. One is found in both plants and animals and involves chemicals called hormones that are produced in one location and then carried within fluids, so some kind of liquid, to other locations in the body. The other communication system is specific to animals and involves electrical signals sent from one location to another by a nervous system. Okay, so we've got two systems, the hormone communication system and the nervous system communication system. Hormones is in both plants and animals. The nervous system is just in animals. Even though cells in a multicellular organism are specialized, they are all using the same DNA as their genetic code. Okay, so your skin cells, your liver cells, your brain cells, they all contain the same DNA. A specialized cell, such as a muscle cell, uses some genes that other cell types do not. So the DNA in your brain has all the instructions to make and run a muscle cell, but they're turned off. They're not being used. The ones for the brain cell are turned on and being used. Okay, so it's the same DNA in every cell of the body. Just certain genes are turned on and some are turned off. Next subsection, C.3.1.2, hierarchy of body subsystems. So hierarchy, what is the importance level of the different systems? Here's the key understanding. Cells, tissues, organs, and body systems as a hierarchy of subsystems that are integrated in a multicellular living organism. Okay, so the base level is cells, that's the smallest level, and they're organized into tissues, and the tissues are organized into organs, and the organs are organized into body systems. So that's the hierarchy. Students should appreciate that this integration, you can think of integration as also cooperation, is responsible for emergent properties. Okay, so aspects or features, qualities that happen when all of these things are working together. For example, a cheetah becomes an effective predator by integration of its body systems. Okay, so the emergent property is being an effective predator, for being fast and having these instincts and whatever. So effective predator is the emergent property, and it comes from how the cheetah systems are integrated. Okay. Multicellular animals and plants have evolved a common hierarchy of organization that permits effective communication and functioning within their environments. It is because of this hierarchy of subsystems that living organisms are able to survive and interact with their surroundings. And you can look at Table 1 here. Table 1 is levels of organization within an animal and a plant. And so there you see it, the subsystem, cell, then tissue, organ system, organism. Okay, so that's the hierarchy there. And then you've got an animal example, and then you've got plant examples of each level, each subsystem. Each level of organization allows greater efficiency and complexity. All living organisms continue to evolve to improve adaptations to the environment in which they exist at each level of cellular organization. So adaptations can happen on the cellular level, the tissue level, organ level, and so on. Emergent properties are those that exist when the sum, think about math, adding all together, the sum of all the parts creates features that do not exist within the individual components. This is the advantage of an organism level of complexity. A puffin does not exist as a puffin until it is a complete being with all its component parts working collectively. It's working together. The organism level of organization results in a combination that is said to be greater than the sum of its parts. So when you have all the parts working together, they don't just do their own thing. There is a result, something new happens with all of this stuff working together, and that's emergent properties. C.3.1.3, integration of organs in animals. The key understanding: integration of organs in animal bodies by hormonal and nervous signaling and by transport of materials and energy. Okay, so you have the communication via the hormones and the nerves, but then you also have transport of materials and energy. So the energy and food that you get, the nutrients and whatnot that you get from eating, they've got to move around. So you should be able to distinguish between the roles of the nervous system and the endocrine system in sending messages. The endocrine system is the hormones, right? Using examples, emphasize the role of the blood system in transporting materials between organs. So we're going to learn about the circulatory system. or I guess they call it the blood system in this book. All right? Organs in the body must work together in order to maintain body processes. Body processes include digestion, digesting your food, maintaining the heart rate, keeping your heart pumping, blood glucose levels, blood sugar, blood pressure, okay, the pressure going through your body, and many others. Sometimes the communication is by the nervous system, and often we have no idea that the communication is actually occurring. The part of your nervous system that communicates with your body tissues without your conscious knowledge is called your autonomic nervous system. ANS, autonomic nervous system. Careful, it's not automatic, it's autonomic. In addition, humans and many other animals use hormone production and secretion. So production is the creation of, the making of, and secretion means the sending out, or the release, in an endocrine system to help communication between organs and to respond to special situations. The body tissue where a hormone exerts an effect is called the target tissue of the hormone. So where the hormone lands and is received there and sets off a signal pathway, sets off a chain reaction, okay, that place, that tissue that where it lands, that's called the target tissue. Because hormones are produced in endocrine glands, they must be transported to their target tissues by the bloodstream. Okay, so the bloodstream transports hormones from where they are produced and secreted to where they need to go, where they need to act. The nervous system and endocrine system often work together to integrate body processes. An example is the release of epinephrine, which is also called adrenaline, from the adrenal glands. Those sit on top of the kidneys. Sensory organs transmit information to the nervous system that indicates epinephrine is needed as part of the fight or flight response, like your stress response. So you see a big spider, and your eyes, together with your brain that recognizes the spider is not a good thing, especially if it's really giant, okay, sends that information to the adrenal glands, right, or up to the brain and then to the adrenal glands, saying that epinephrine is needed. The autonomic nervous system then sends impulses to the adrenal glands to release epinephrine. So the autonomic part of the nervous system that you're not even aware of, that you're not in control of, it talks to the adrenal glands. So it sends an impulse there. Okay, it says release epinephrine. This hormone leads to a variety of body responses. So there's a lot of different target tissues for epinephrine, including increased heart rate and increased flow of blood to muscles to prepare the body for immediate increased activity, like fighting or running away or flying away. This integration between body systems is thought to have evolved as a survival mechanism. Even though the nervous and endocrine systems often work together to integrate the systems in the body, each has its own characteristics. So now we're going to look at the characteristics of the nervous system. In the nervous system, electrical impulses are used to send messages. Cells called neurons are used to transmit and receive impulses. So send and receive impulses. Portions of the system control voluntary actions. That means actions that you choose to do, while other portions control involuntary actions, like reflexes, things that you have no control over. They're going to happen no matter what. Responses occur quickly but are short-lived. Okay, so these are very short actions. In the endocrine system, hormones are used to send messages. Hormones travel through the bloodstream. Only involuntary functions are controlled. Okay, so you don't get to decide what your hormones are doing. Responses are typically slow but are long-lasting. Okay, so it takes a while for the response to happen, but then it happens for a while. Most multicellular organisms have become so large that it is impossible for nutrients and waste products to be efficiently and directly moved from cell to cell. Transport vessels and aqueous fluids, that means water-based fluids, have evolved to serve that purpose. Humans and many other animals use blood circulating in arteries and veins to transport a variety of substances throughout the body tissues. Okay, so this is like the blood system is the transport system. It reaches all tissues in the body. The oxygen needed by leg muscles will be supplied by blood that has received that oxygen from lung tissues a short time before it is used. So the lungs receive the oxygen, goes into the bloodstream, and then it gets carried to the muscles where it can then be used. Urea, produced as a byproduct of protein metabolism in the liver. So when we use proteins that we eat in the liver, there's some trash that's created, a byproduct called urea, and is transported by blood to the kidneys, which then filter it out, and the urea becomes part of the urine that we then expel from the body. C.3.1.4, the brain and information processing. Key understanding: the brain as a central information integration organ. Okay, so central, in the middle, key, information, so it takes in information, and integration. Okay, so we're talking about a central place where information from different places is put together. Limit to the role of the brain in processing information combined from several inputs and in learning and memory. Students are not required to know details such as the role of slow-acting neurotransmitters. Here we go. The brain is the most complex organ in the body. The brain regulates and monitors unconscious body processes such as blood pressure, heart rate, and breathing. Okay, so regulate means adjust, change small amounts, make sure that it's staying within certain parameters. That's what regulate means. And monitor means it keeps track of these things. It measures them in a way. It receives a flood of messages from the senses and responds by controlling balance, muscle coordination, and most voluntary movements. Okay, so the brain is responsible for the fact that I've moved my hand like this. This is a voluntary movement. Some parts of the brain deal with speech, emotions, and problem solving. The brain relies on a variety of receptors to receive information. Okay, you remember what a receptor is? It's that transmembrane protein sitting in the transmembrane, or crosses the membrane of the cell or the organelle, and it receives ligands. Some of these receptors relay information, that means they pass on information, that we process at the conscious level, so at the level at which we're aware, such as photoreceptors, located within the retina of the eyes for visual information. Okay, so we have receptors in the eyes that take in information, and we're aware of that. That's on the conscious level. I am aware that I am seeing. That's photoreceptors. chemoreceptors, spelled with a CH, chemoreceptors, many located within our tongue for tasting. Thermoreceptors, located in the skin to provide information on changes in temperature. Mechanoreceptors, mechano as in mechanic, or as in like movement. Mechanoreceptors located in the inner ear and sensitive to sound vibrations. So we've got 4 types of receptors listed here that relay information that we process at a conscious level. Photoreceptors, chemoreceptors, thermoreceptors, mechanoreceptors. Other receptors send information to the brain at the subconscious level. So we're not consciously aware of that information being sent. And are important components, means parts, important parts of our autonomic nervous system. Now we've discussed the autonomic nervous system briefly. Examples include osmoreceptors, located in the carotid arteries and the hypothalamus of the brain, which sense solutes in water content of blood. Okay, so it senses what's in your blood, and particularly how much water is in your blood, but other things as well. Those are called osmoreceptors. Baroreceptors, could be also pronounced baroreceptors, located in carotid arteries and the aorta, which sense blood pressure based on how much a blood vessel is being stretched by internal pressure. Okay, so you've got the pressure of that blood going through, right? Depending on how much blood, arteries are not like made out of plastic. They're tissue. They're part of your body. They're stretchy to a certain degree. So if you've got a lot of blood coming through, a lot of fluid, they stretch a bit. And the baroreceptors are aware, become aware of that stretch. Proprioceptors, no, that's not right. Proprioceptors, located in muscles and joints, which provide the brain with a sense of balance and coordination, especially when the body is moving. Okay, so those 3 receptors, osmoreceptors, baroreceptors, and proprioceptors, they are busy doing their thing without us being consciously aware of them. While receiving sensory information from a variety of receptors, the brain continuously processes the information and generates responses as needed. The process involves filtering the sensory information that is important from the information that is unimportant. This is necessary because the electrical signals traveling from sense organs are continuous and vast. So we've got a lot of information coming in all the time, and the brain needs to sort through what is relevant and kind of adjust things. This is why people with certain types of neuropsychiatric differences, especially different places on the autism spectrum, struggle there. The issue is with this organization of a lot of sensory input. So sometimes sensory input that other people are able to just, their brains automatically filter it out, is not getting filtered out. Same with ADHD. There's a lot of stuff going in. That's why with kids with ADHD and sometimes also with autism have issues with their socks and their feet, the little seam on the sock, the little bump on their foot demands their attention, despite the fact that it's not painful, it's not doing anything bad, it's just sensory information, but the brain doesn't filter that out as unnecessary. It does the kind of the opposite. It's there's something there, we need to fix it. So with small things, those can be evidence and used as symptoms to diagnose, like, okay, there's something going on with this person's brain's ability to filter out sensory information. The brain communicates with the body in two ways. One involves impulses sent in and out of the spinal cord by 31 paired nerves. Paired means there's two of them, two matching ones each side, called spinal nerves, which emerge directly from the spinal cord. The other involves the brain's own nerves called cranial nerves. Your cranium. It's like your head. Okay, so you have spinal nerves and cranial nerves. This set of 12 paired nerves, the cranial nerves, connects various body parts to the brain through the brain stem. An example of cranial nerves is the pair of optic nerves that carry impulses from the retinas of the eye to the brain. The brain is divided into three main areas, each of which is subdivided further based on location and function. Remember, function is what is it doing? The cerebrum. The cerebrum is divided into right and left sides called cerebral hemispheres. This is like the way we divide the planet into hemispheres, the south and north hemisphere. Okay, the brain is divided into left and right, cerebral hemispheres. Each hemisphere consists of 4 lobes. A lobe is like a section. Okay, and there's kind of some space, not like big space, but the sections, they're next to each other. But if you open up a brain, you can pull them apart like the sections of like an orange. Like the sections of a citrus fruit, they sit together, right? But they're quite clearly different sections. Okay. So the hemisphere consists of 4 lobes or sections. Frontal, it's the forward part. Frontal is up. Frontal is here. Temporal, parietal, and occipital. Okay, we're going to look at figure 1. That shows where these are. So this is a side view of the brain. So you can see that the frontal lobe is in the front of the head. The parietal lobe is just behind that. The occipital lobe is in the back. And the temporal lobe is in the front on the bottom. Below that, you have the cerebellum and the spinal cord. The neural processing carried out by these 4 lobes, I'm talking about the lobes in the cerebrum, dominates our conscious activities. So our thinking and what we're looking at and what we're feeling, like the processing of that stuff happens there. Although the 4 lobes interact with each other continuously, learning and memory activities are largely coordinated by the frontal lobe. The cerebellum. The cerebellum coordinates voluntary movements and controls balance and equilibrium. So up in your frontal lobe, that's your thinking. And down in the cerebellum, you've got like the coordination of, you're working this part of the, see my hand moving like this? It's being very coordinated or not. That's the responsibility of the cerebellum there. And the cerebellum is also kind of keeping me upright from falling over, whatever. It's holding my balance. Brainstem. In addition to relaying impulses between the cerebrum and cerebellum and spinal cord, the brainstem is responsible for most functions associated with the autonomic nervous system. Remember the autonomic nervous system? If you don't remember, check your notes. The functions controlled by the brainstem are necessary for life yet occur at a subconscious level. The medulla, or medulla oblongata, is an important part of the brainstem because it regulates both breathing and heart rate. Okay, so most of the time, your breathing is just happening, right? And your heart is just going. You don't have to think about your heart rate because it's not the thinking part of your brain that's in control there. Okay? All parts of the brain must interact with each other for proper neural functioning. But the frontal lobe of the cerebrum is the dominant structure for learning and memory. Okay, so the cerebrum is what's helping you remember these words. The cerebrum is helping you. It's what's remembering that it's called the cerebrum. Very specific neural functions have been mapped by location on and within the brain. Specific activities are also associated with specific neurotransmitters, chemical signals, right? Chemical signaling, or signaling chemicals, right? That carry signals from one brain neuron to another. Some examples of neurotransmitters used within the brain are serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins. Okay, so this is how the different neurons talk to each other. There are many others. C.3.1.5, the spinal cord and unconscious processes. These processes you're not aware of, okay? The spinal cord as an integrating center for unconscious processes. Okay, so unconscious stuff happens. A lot of that is integrated in the spinal cord, not your brain. Together, the brain and spinal cord make up the central nervous system, the CNS. So the CNS has two parts, the brain and the spinal cord. The spinal cord is a neural pathway between the body and the brain, but is capable of information processing on its own. So it's not just your brain that processes stuff. The spinal cord does some heavy lifting also. The spinal cord controls some unconscious reflexes associated with balance and other skeletal muscle functions independently of the brain. So not all sensory information and responses pass through the brain. Reflexes go directly through the spinal cord, which means you have no control over them at all. For example, when you're sitting at the doctor's and they take that little hammer and knock it on your knee, that's a reflex. It doesn't have anything to do with your brain. It goes directly. So the information of the hammer hitting it goes to the spinal cord, and the response to kick out the knee comes back from the spinal cord. The 31 pairs of spinal nerves bring sensory information into the CNS from the body and allow motor, which is muscular, information to be sent out. Some of the information traveling in and out of the CNS is processed at the conscious level, up here, meaning that the cerebrum of the brain is involved in the pathway. The spinal cord has two types of neural tissue. Remember what tissue is? A bunch of specialized cells hanging out together with a specific job to do. Okay. The spinal cord has two types of neural tissue, white matter and gray matter. Matter just means stuff. It's just a fancy way to say stuff. White stuff and gray stuff. The white matter is composed primarily, that means mostly, of axons of neurons and carries neural impulses to and from the brain. The gray matter of the spinal cord contains neurons and synapses involved in spinal cord integration processes. When sensory information enters the gray matter of the spinal cord, that's this spinal cord integration processes place. So when sensory information comes into there, and motor So when sensory information enters the gray matter of the spinal cord and motor information is immediately sent back out, the pathway of the impulse is called a reflex arc. So this pathway, the sensory information coming in, like from your knee when you get hit with the hammer, going into the spinal cord, into the gray matter of the spinal cord, and the motor information is sent back out to kick it. The motor information in this sense is to kick out your leg. That pathway is called the reflex arc. An arc is like that, like an arch. Okay, you will study a specific spinal reflex arc in section 3.1.9. So we'll look at a more specific one. Let me see. Let's jump ahead and see what that is. Let's look at 3.1.9. Look at me being gross, changing the pages. Pain reflex arcs. Pain reflex arcs as example of involuntary response with skeletal muscle as the effector. Okay, so we're going to come to that. But responses to pain.